Welcome to this explainer. Imagine looking across a battlefield, right? And what you see isn't a foreign enemy, but your own people. Muslims facing Muslims. Both sides are carrying Islamic banners. And the leaders? We're talking about the absolute most revered companions of the Prophet. Talha, Zubair, Aisha, Muawiyah on one side, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, the Prophet's own cousin, on the other. It is a profoundly heavy, almost unthinkable scenario. The Prophet Muhammad actually warned that this exact thing would happen, a severe trial or fitna where both sides fought, not out of malice, but because they were caught up in the incredibly complex, tragic realities of their world. Today, relying purely on our historical sources, we are going to analyze the first fitna. We're going to keep this completely objective with maximum scholarly care. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is exactly how we'll break down this deeply sensitive historical period. We'll start with Ali's impossible inheritance, move into the tragedy at Basra, look at the stalemate at Siffin, the rise of the Khawarij, and finally, lessons for modern Muslims. Section 1. Ali's impossible inheritance. To really grasp the first fitna, you've got to put yourself in the sheer chaos of the year 35 AH. The Caliph, Othman, has just been assassinated. The city of Medina is completely fractured. People are grieving, they're furious, and the rebels? They're literally still in the city. So the community is hit with this massive, urgent question: who leads us now? But this time, it's infinitely more complicated than before. Abu Bakr and Umar transitioned to power relatively smoothly. Now, a leader has been murdered. Ali ibn Abi Talib is essentially forced really, into accepting the caliphate. He initially resists. He wants a broader, consultative process, but the pressure is just immense. So he accepts it. But what he inherits is a community that is deeply, deeply fractured over one single burning demand: justice for Othman. Now, here's the central, absolutely impossible tension that tore the community apart. And we have to look at this objectively, because honestly, both sides held positions that made complete sense. On one hand, you've got Ali. He doesn't deny for a second that Uthman's killers need to be punished, but his prerequisite is that you must establish stable governance first. Rushing to punish suspects in a totally chaotic environment, that just risks massive injustice and even more fracturing. On the other hand, you have his critics, most vocally Muawiyah over in Syria. Their prerequisite is immediate justice. They argued that prosecuting the murderers of a caliph is literally the single most urgent matter on earth, and until that happens, no pledge of allegiance can possibly be given. It's a classic both-and tragedy. Both Ali's need for state stability and his critics' demand for legal justice were entirely legitimate. Section 2. The tragedy at Basra. Let's move through the timeline and see how this all builds, mentally anchoring ourselves through these 5 dense, tragic years. Following the assassination in 35 senior companions Talha, Zubair, and Aisha gather in Mecca. They decide to march to Basra in Iraq. Now, it's crucial to know, their goal wasn't initially war. It was to build a base of support to press for the punishment of Uthman's killers. From a position of real strength, they were acting on what they genuinely believed was an Islamic imperative for justice. Now, as they march to Basra, there's some really intense negotiation going on. Ali meets with them, messengers are going back and forth, and, according to historical sources like Tabari, they were incredibly close to a peaceful resolution. But well, the reality of civil conflict is just messy. Third-party agitators, individuals who had ties to the original rebel movement against Othman, deliberately disrupted these near agreements. Their interest was in continued conflict, not resolution. They struck in the total confusion of the night, sparking the violence that eventually became known as the Battle of the Camel. It's so important to understand that this clash wasn't a simple good versus evil event. Deliberate sabotage played a massive, devastating role here. Section 3. The stalemate at Siffin. Let's just take a moment here to acknowledge the staggering human cost of these engagements. At the Battle of the Camel, Ali prevails, but tragically, Talha is killed in the fighting. Zubair actually feels genuine remorse after talking with Ali and withdraws, but he's killed while leaving. Aisha is treated with profound honor by Ali and safely escorted back to Medina, and historical sources note she expressed deep regret for her participation for the rest of her life. But the conflict shifts to Syria. Muawiyah still absolutely refuses allegiance, and this leads to Siffin, a massive, grueling, 90-day campaign right on the Euphrates River, resulting in heartbreaking casualties on both sides. The turning point at Siffin was marked by this brilliant but honestly devastating tactical maneuver. Just as Ali's forces were gaining the upper hand, Muawiyah's advisor, the brilliant strategist Amr ibn al-As, orders his soldiers to literally hoist copies of the Quran on the tips of their spears. They started shouting, "Let the book of Allah judge between us." It was a masterful, totally paralyzing tactical maneuver. It hopelessly fractured Ali's coalition right on the spot. Many of his own men, deeply moved by the religious appeal, demanded that Ali accept arbitration. Ali knew it was a tactical ploy, for sure, but to avoid even more bloodshed, he reluctantly agreed. Section 4. Rise of the Khawarij. So, that arbitration at Dumat al-Jandal, it was utterly inconclusive. It basically just institutionalized the division. But the most dangerous consequence was actually what happened within Ali's own camp. The very same men who had literally forced Ali to accept the arbitration suddenly turned right around and condemned him for doing it. They became known as the Khawarij, literally those who went out, and they birthed an entirely new, incredibly dangerous theological innovation. They declared that anyone who accepted human arbitration or committed a major sin was simply no longer a Muslim. This blanket declaration of apostasy against fellow Muslims turned into violent extremism almost overnight. And this brilliantly illustrates the ideological battle that was raging. The Khawarij ran on a slogan that, on the surface, sounded perfectly pious. They'd say, "Judgment belongs to Allah alone." But Ali's famous rebuttal? It cuts right through that weaponized theology. He said it was a word of truth through which falsehood is sought. He clearly recognized that they were using divine authority as a cover to justify massacring other Muslims. Ali tried to debate them, he really tried to reason with them, but eventually their unchecked violence against civilians forced him to march out and defeat them at the Battle of Nahrawan. The tragedy here is that defeating an army doesn't defeat an ideology. The surviving Khawarij plotted their revenge. In the year 40 AH, an assassin named Abdul Rahman ibn Muljam struck Ali with a poisoned sword right as he went to lead the Fajr dawn prayer in Kufa. Ali lived for 2 days. And even in his final hours, his extraordinary character just shone through. He explicitly ordered that his assassin be fed, treated humanely, and not tortured. With his passing on the 21st of Ramadan, the entire 30-year era of the rightly guided caliphs came to a deeply somber close. Section 5. Lessons for Modern Muslims. All right, so we've covered the history, but why does this matter to us right now? Well, these takeaways on navigating conflict are absolutely timeless. First off, we've got to reject these simplistic absolute right versus absolute wrong narratives. Real life isn't like that. Both sides can hold perfectly legitimate concerns at the exact same time. Second, we have to be incredibly wary of deliberate agitators who exploit genuine grievances just to keep a fire burning. Third, recognize the Khawarij pattern. Extreme piety, when it's combined with violent certainty, is a massive recurring danger. Weaponizing divine authority to justify harming others causes immeasurable destruction. So a really crucial takeaway here is how we actually judge this history. Remember these revered figures? They were human beings. They were fully capable of profound regret, just like Aisha and Zubair. All these showed us that true leaders often have to carry incredibly heavy burdens in total silence, their absolute best intentions just endlessly frustrated by circumstance. He also proved that showing mercy to defeated opponents is never, ever a weakness. But perhaps most importantly, please do not let ancient fitna become fuel for modern division. We study these imperfect human moments to properly understand our past, not to weaponize them against each other today. I want to leave you with this final, incredibly powerful thought. Long before any of this happened, the Prophet actually warned his companions about times of intense, confusing internal conflict. And his advice was profound. He said, "Sit, stay home, break your sword if you must." Think about that. When the truth is entirely blurred, when both sides are shouting that they have the ultimate moral high ground, refusing to participate in the harm of your own community is not cowardice. It is literally the highest form of wisdom. So what does that mean for us? How can we apply that exact wisdom to the conflicts we face in our own lives and communities today? Thank you so much for exploring this history with me. Take care and keep learning.